Hello and welcome to another digital story. This digital story is to help you through one of the assessments in Design and Develop a Learning Program, and that is that you need to design and develop a learning program against an entire unit of competency. Now before you start, it's probably a good idea to get a hard copy of the learning program template that you have been provided with, and also to have training.gov.au up. If you've already chosen the unit that you're going to use, then perhaps a copy of that in front of you as well. The first step in creating your learning program is to choose a unit of competency. Now you may have already done that. That's fine. If not, you're going to need to get onto training.gov.au and have a little hunt around. This may take some time of going in, downloading units, having a look at them, but you do need to keep in mind that the unit you choose should be a unit with which the content of you're very comfortable with. For example, I wouldn't choose a cookery unit because I'm not a chef and I'm not even a particularly good cook. I wouldn't choose a marketing unit because I don't know about marketing. You need to choose a unit that you know about. You know the content and how it plays out in the workplace. Once you've chosen your unit, and I'm very happy for you to have a conversation with me about the suitability of a unit, you need to download it from training.gov.au. You can keep an electronic copy somewhere, but you can also print it out and have a hard copy. Okay, you've chosen your unit and you have a copy of it handy. So the next step, step 3, is to look at your learning program template and start to populate the details at the top of that learning program. It's important to be able to identify the qualification or the course that the learners are completing. Then the next row down is simply the unit code and title that you're about to deliver and assess. The bottom two rows, group and dates, this information is important because we need to be able to match a learning program with any individual learner. So I should be able to look back and say John Smith, now he was a Friday person and he completed it in semester 1 2011. I should be able to go back through my files and pull out that learning program and know exactly what John was involved in. Step 4 is pretty straightforward. We're simply going to copy and paste the unit description straight from the unit across into the template. The only time this step is a little more complex is if your unit description is long and convoluted. You might remember the unit description for our barista unit. It was about, I don't know, nearly 2/3 of a page long. If your unit description is long, you need to read through it and just take across the critical information. The aim here is within 1 or 2 sentences to give your learner a really big picture idea of what this unit is about. So we've looked at populating the top table and we've looked at cutting and pasting the unit description across, trimming it up a little bit if we need to. We're now going to move down to the next step. But before we do, you need to make sure that you know the unit you have chosen really, really well. You need to put it beside the couch, you need to put it beside the bed. If you have a magazine rack in your toilet, it can sit in there. You need to read it multiple times, frontwards and backwards. You need to know what is in your unit of competency and you need to know what that looks like in the workplace. So remember, when you look at your unit, the title of the unit is the work activity, a work activity in somebody's job role. The elements are the key tasks that make up that work activity. Go through that unit, unpack that unit and get a really good idea of how it would play out in the workplace. Now that you've familiarised yourself with your unit of competency, we can move on to step 5. That is identifying the unit requirements or nutshelling the unit. Now during class we talked about a number of methods for doing this. The first one was pruning. The second one was cutting and pasting across, capturing the detail without actually cutting and pasting the whole unit. And another one that we probably didn't spend too much time on, that's the third method, which is developing your own skills and abilities. Firstly, let's look at the option that I call pruning. Pruning is a process of eliminating any duplication in the unit. When you read through your unit, check to see if the elements and performance criteria tell an accurate story of how that unit looks in the workplace. For example, if we were looking at the unit Use Hand Tools, the elements might be match hand tool to job, use hand tools safely, maintain and store hand tools. Now those three elements tell a pretty good story about using hand tools in many workplaces. The performance criteria give excellent additional detail against each of those elements and reinforce the intent of this unit. In my head, I might be thinking, yep, I could use the elements and performance criteria. But when you prune a unit, you do need to check that you are not missing any new information that is hidden in the required skills and knowledge or the evidence guide. On this screen, you can see the first two elements from BSB CMM 201A, Communicate in the Workplace. We will have talked about this unit during class. The elements for this unit are 1. Gather, convey and receive information and ideas. 2. Complete workplace documentation and correspondence. And 3. Communicate in a way that responds positively to individual differences. These three elements tell a reasonable story of what the work activity, communicate in the workplace, looks like. The performance criteria provide detail and explain the workplace standard. So I have decided that a process of pruning with this unit would probably be a good way of nutshelling the unit requirements for a learning program. And on this slide you can see that I have started to check the dot points in the required skills and knowledge. If I believe they're adequately covered by the elements and performance criteria, then I can scrub them out or cross them out. If I don't think that a dot point is covered by the performance criteria, then I leave it as it is. I also need to check the subheading in the evidence guide, Critical Aspects, and for some units I will also need to check the heading or subheading, Context of Assessment. Once I have pruned the unit in this way, I can cut and paste the elements and performance criteria across into my learning program, and any dot points in the required skills and knowledge or in the evidence guide can be simply added to the bottom of the unit requirements heading. I usually use a subheading called Additional Requirements. So you can see on the screen there, I have cut and pasted across the elements and performance criteria. There were 2 dot points that I didn't scrub out because I didn't think they were adequately covered in the performance criteria. I've simply added them at the bottom under a heading, Additional Requirements. Okay, the other method of nutshelling the unit of competency for your learning program is to simply cut and paste across the parts of the unit that you believe adequately catch the detail without duplicating information. Most commonly, this will be the elements and the performance criteria. Remember, the elements provide the key tasks that make up the work activity, and the performance criteria give you the detail, what the task should look like in the workplace. However, you do need to check, just as you did with pruning, that there is nothing hidden in the required skills and knowledge or the evidence guide, which is critical to the delivery and assessment of your unit. If you are working in the health and community services training packages, there is often surprising detail in the required skills and knowledge, and you can't simply omit it. You do need to include it in your learning program. Here is an example of an MEM unit where the elements and performance criteria have been successfully used in a learning program. Here is another example. This time I have used the barista unit that we discussed in class. This unit has 7 elements that tell a very logical story of how the unit looks in the workplace, but each element has up to 8 performance criteria. So I looked at the required skills and knowledge and discovered that the dot points under these headings clearly outline the scope of the unit. So in this instance, I have cut and pasted across the elements and the dot points from the required skills and knowledge to nutshell my unit and to populate that unit requirements section of the learning program. So we've discussed 2 methods of nutshelling your unit of competency for your learning program. The first was a process of pruning, the second, cutting and pasting parts of the unit which best capture the essence of the unit requirements. The third method involves you writing your own action statements of the workplace outcomes for the unit. These statements then need to be mapped carefully back to the performance criteria, the required skills and knowledge, and the evidence guide. This method is usually used by very practiced trainers and assessors who've been working with units of competency for quite some time. If you'd like to know more about this method, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Let's move on to Step 6, the Delivery and Assessment Plan. This is pretty straightforward, as all you need to do is indicate where the learning is likely to take place and where assessment will take place. For example, if you're planning to facilitate the learning in a face-to-face mode, simply tick in that column. If you're planning that your students might need to engage in learning in their own time, then indicate that in the self-directed column. And similarly for the assessment section. Step 7, the delivery schedule. This is a little more challenging. This step requires you to identify the key topics or the themes that you will shape your learning activities around. If you know your unit of competency well and you have a good feel for how it plays out in the workplace, then you might simply brainstorm all the topics you instinctively know will need to be covered. You would then need to refine your brainstorm and place the topics into a logical order. Then you would need to check back with the unit to see if you'd missed anything. The example on the screen is from that unit, Communicate in the Workplace, that we've talked about previously. This is the same unit, Communicate in the Workplace, but the alternative here is to use the elements as a guide as you develop your key topics. Remember though, you don't want to just use the elements and cut and paste all the performance criteria in. You're trying to identify topics, sort of key points that you're going to cover in your class. Once you are happy with your key topics and you believe that they have a logical flow, you can move to the right-hand column, the comments column. The information that you would include in this column could be whether you'll be completing an assessment task in that session, if you are having a particular guest speaker or an activity that you would consider out of the norm, perhaps whether the students needed to bring anything in particular to that class, or whether you are working in a different environment, for example a computer lab. So as we finish the delivery schedule section of your learning program, you can see how the three columns work. The date, and if you don't know a particular date, you might call it Session 1, Session 2, Session 3, or Workshop 1, 2 and 3 as I have in this example. You have your key topics through the middle, even with some introductory activities and close to the session added to each workshop or each session. And in the right-hand column, just some additional information for the learner. So as we finish the delivery schedule of our learning program, you can begin to see the overall plan for your delivery. The first column indicates the date of each session, or even the number of sessions. The middle column gives you the key topics covered in each session, and even indicates the introductory and closing activities that will occur each session. And the right-hand column simply provides some additional useful information for your students. We're nearly done. Step 8, resources. This is simply an opportunity for you to list any resources that you require your students to have. For example, there might be a textbook, perhaps all your classes require that they have steel cap boots and other PPE. There might be websites that you're wanting them to refer to regularly. Again, it's just about being upfront so that they're very aware of your expectations. Step 9, assessment methods. It is best practice and a quality requirement that students are informed about the methods of assessment that they will experience against each unit of competency. We also need to inform students of the due date of any assessment tasks that they have to complete. It's also important that as assessors we ensure that we are assessing all the unit requirements, and as such we need to map each assessment to the unit. In this example, again from BSB CMM 201A, Communicate in the Workplace, you could see that there are two assessment methods. There's a very brief description of how those assessments will play out for each learner. There's a due date. In the first one, it's to be defined because we need to set an interview time. The second one, it has a date there, the 9th of June. And you can see in the right-hand column the unit requirements that are being assessed by each of those tasks. Yes, we're at the end. Step 10. You simply need to give the students a point of contact with you. You might choose that it's phone, you might choose that it's email, it might be both. Some teachers even indicate a time that is best to catch them. That's entirely up to you as long as your students have some method of making contact with you. Now, the joy of this little movie is that you can stop and start it as many times as you like. So if you've got to the end and forgotten what went on at the start, or you've got to the end and you're still a bit confused, feel free to go right back to the start and play it all the way through, or just go back and focus on the bits that you were unsure of. Also, don't forget to read through the instructions on Against Assessment 3 where you're developing the learning program for your own unit. And if you're really stuck, for goodness sake, send me an email or give me a call and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.